Welcome to Inspire Me with Jay, a podcast focusing on meditation, the near-death experience, and all things spiritual. Please like, subscribe to this channel, and share everywhere. Thank you. This is Jay Spillers with Inspire Me with Jay. My guest today is Lynn. Lynn, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. So why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
All right. Well, my name is Lynn, going by Shamama Lynn now because I am a shamanic healer. But I know your podcast is about meditation, and I've been doing meditation for about 12 years. I used to be an aerospace engineer, and I was feeling discontent with my life. I just knew it wasn't what I wanted. And I ended up having a spiritual awakening. And in that process, I discovered various forms of meditation. I started with Vipassana meditation, which is a Buddhist form of meditation, but it's very removed from the ritual of Buddhism. It's just insight meditation. With that, I've also done some metta, which is loving kindness, which is also a Buddhist meditation. And then what I do a lot of is Reiki meditation. So sending energy healing, which is very different than, say, Vipassana. And I think the intentions are also different. And then I'm also into tons of different meditation teachers. I'm a really big fan of Joe Dispenza. So I've been meditating for many years as a means to come in alignment with my higher self.
So isn't Vipassana very similar to mindfulness? I think mindfulness sort of grew out of that, didn't it?
Yeah, they're basically the same. Vipassana means insight meditation in Pali, and it was the original meditation technique that the Buddha used to become enlightened. And it was and then as Buddhism spread and Buddhism became not just meditation, right? Just like every religion is kind of co-opted and changed and becomes something much different. The original teachings of Buddha, the meditation techniques, were held in Burma. And then sometime in the 90s, they kind of started to make their way to the West again through some teachers that had gone over there, in the 60s, 70s. And then there's a guy named Goenka, who's very well known in the meditation for bringing Vipassana meditation to the West.
Well, is Vipassana any different than mindfulness? Has mindfulness altered the practice or updated it in some way?
Well, so I know that you can yes and no. Here's the answer that I'm going to give. So life can be meditation. So your life theoretically could be a Vipassana meditation because there's walking meditation, which would be considered Vipassana, where you're walking and feeling every step of your body on the floor, or every step, every movement. So in that aspect, mindfulness can be integrated in every part of our life, right? However, when I think of meditation, it's very easy in the Western world for us to be like, oh, I'm mindful, I'm meditating all the time, and there's something to be said for me for sitting down and doing a meditation. And so in Vipassana, you are feeling sensations in your body. So there's no mantras, there's no images, there's no gurus. You're just feeling and sensing the sensation that's arising and then becoming aware of that. And so, yes, we have the opportunity to do this every moment of our lives. However, most of us forget to be mindful when we need to be mindful. So that's why it's good to have a sitting practice, because you experience everything in 20 minutes. You experience frustration because there's something else you want to be doing or something else, you're like forcing yourself to do this meditation for 5, 10, 15 minutes, whatever it is for every person. There was a while where I was doing it for 40 minutes 2 times a day, and it's a discipline. And then after you do the discipline and you do the sitting and you really understand what it means to be mindful, from a still place, then you can take it out into your outside world. But so yes, they're the same. Like Vipassana is mindfulness. Mindfulness maybe isn't always Vipassana. I don't know. You know
So
what I mean?
mindfulness can, yeah, so mindfulness can be broader than Vipassana.
Yeah, I think
And I guess the thing is, yeah.
mindfulness, you're hearing that everywhere in the mainstream these days, right? Like be mindful. Psychologists are using it. So yeah, I totally agree with you. They're the same. And then I think mindfulness is just a little bit broader. You know, I mean, anyone that teaches Vipassana meditation really like makes it clear that it's separate from Buddhism. Like you can practice Vipassana meditation and not be a Buddhist. But then you could also just say, I have a mindfulness practice where I sit. So I've done specific, these are free. So this is for everyone, especially now that we're kind of post-pandemic. There are still some rules regarding masks and vaccinations, but they offer 10-day meditations all around the world, donation based. So if you don't have money and you want to sit, you're able to sit. And you start meditating at about 4 in the morning and you meditate till about 9 at night, mostly in like 1 hour chunks, 1.5 hour chunks. And you really get to the root, because when you have nothing to do but sit with yourself, that's when stuff really comes up. And so for someone looking to start a meditation practice, if you have the means to carve out 10 days, having something like that to jumpstart your practice, I mean, it's incredibly difficult. It's one of the hardest things that a person can ever do, but so rewarding. I've done 9 of them at this point in my life, and I would do more if a lot of them have vaccination requirements that I don't meet, and I'm happy to be clear about that. But I think that will be relaxed eventually as well.
Mm-hmm. So, do you think you can explore feelings, emotions, situations in a mindfulness practice as you meditate? Because, it's like sometimes I'll look at like feelings that I have or a situation, I'll detach from it, I'll observe it without judgment, and then sometimes I might even go further and like shower some love in the situation for it. I mean, do you think that can be part of mindfulness and Vipassana?
Yeah, I mean so that's when you're getting into, like, this is just kind of the nitty-gritty terminology. So when you then get into the loving part, that's sending metta. Oh, I wish I had
Mm-hmm.
my card. So Vipassana is made up of 9 different virtues, and one of them is metta, which is loving kindness. And then the other is dana, which is generosity, which is why when you go to a 10-day Vipassana meditation, you donate, if you can, as being generous. I'm going to Google them really quick if I can see if I can. It's like 10 virtues or something. Yeah, so that is what you're talking about. Sending love out is metta. And then there's all these different parts. So there's renunciation, morality, effort, wisdom, tolerance, truthfulness, strong determination, selfless love, and generosity. So that's, I guess, what makes maybe Vipassana a little bit different than just mindfulness, is there's kind of a way of
Mm-hmm.
life wrapped in it. This idea. So what you're talking about is you're doing your mindfulness, you're doing Vipassana, and then at the end, you're doing a little metta at the end. And when you go to in fact, when you go to a 10-day Vipassana, the last day you learn metta and you do a whole meditation on loving kindness. And when you serve, you do metta meditations at the end of the day. So yes, that's I can tell that you're tuned in to, a lot of times people have, Buddhism believes in past lives. So I know your
Mm-hmm.
background is in Christianity, and then you're reaching into meditation and mindfulness. And so then you're getting into some belief stuff. And so I've adopted, because I've had experiences and knowings in my mind, the possibility of past lives. And so the idea
Mm-hmm.
is that your soul is reincarnated many, many times. And the reason you are already doing what would be considered a Buddhist meditation, right? Like metta and everything, like doing the sitting, the observing, and then adding that little extra N, like that's totally what they do, is because you've lived past lives as a Buddhist. You've already learned all this stuff. And then you've
Mm-hmm.
also, probably been Christian many, many times, like we're talking about many, many, many lifetimes, enough where one can gather all of the experiences till they become a figure like Christ, who literally was leader of the domain of his universe, that had had every possible experience a soul could possibly have and ascended in his glory. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So the idea is we're all kind of headed to that this lifetime. We don't know when, right? Many, many lifetimes. That's another interesting thing about Buddhism and meditation is monks, for example, when they enter a monkhood, and I think the same is true for priests and nuns to a certain extent. When they enter the monastery, they know they're not guaranteed enlightenment in this. I mean, I guess more so for Buddhists because they believe in multiple lifetimes. They know they're not guaranteed salvation in this one lifetime or enlightenment or whatever. It's like the Buddhists are very clear that every step is one step along the path, and you just do your best. And it might be many lifetimes, but every step counts and every step is important. And that's why meditation is important, because every minute, every 5-minute timer counts. It's like coming back to yourself and observing yourself and just taking that time to breathe and be in the present moment. And like, I know it's difficult to get started when you've never done it before, because you try to quiet your mind for 5 minutes and you realize you're a complete wreck and you can't even be calm for 5 minutes. And that's why you keep doing it. Do you know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, it takes practice, just like everything else.
Well, and I think the thing that I've always been with meditation is I'm not real rigid on structure or formalism. I'm very eclectic in how I approach it. Because sometimes I know a lot of people, they'll get into this is a particular form that I do, this is all that I do, and that's fine. But it's like for me, I kind of, like to jump around a lot when I'm actually meditating. I meditate about 40 minutes, but I might just do different things. I might do like affirmations for part of it. I might do visualizations. So I don't have any like rigid rules like I have to do it this way. I always start with some deep breaths at the beginning and just sort of go from there. And I'll watch my breath at times, but I don't have like any set pattern like I have to do it this way or that. And it seems like it's easier for me to do it that way because I'm kind of freed up to go in different directions. You know, this is like
I love
you're
that.
highly relaxed and you're trying to be aware is what you're trying to do. And as long as you're doing that, you can kind of have freedom to move around. I think. Is that what is your experience with meditation in terms of that?
Yeah, I mean, I'll do many different types for different, sometimes I forget to call these other ones meditation, but gratitude, that I look at it this way. There's prayer and there's meditation. And what we say is that prayer is asking and meditation is receiving. So if I were to be journaling or doing maybe affirmations, something like that, I might consider that more in the realm of prayer, just a little bit. Like, like I'm sending out vibes, I'm asking for what I want in my life, and I'm creating. And then the meditation is where I'm becoming still and I'm not that affirmations aren't meditation, but for me, I do a different kind of just stillness and think about opening and receiving. And this comes from the law of attraction, a channel named Abraham Hicks. Have you heard of them? Have you heard of Abraham
Yeah, I've
Hicks?
heard of him. Yeah.
So they talk about the vortex of attraction. And so you're sending out all of your desires, all of your dreams, very Christ consciousness, very much heaven on earth, creating that. We're creating our own reality. And The idea is then you have to come in alignment for that vortex to open. So we can be sending out our desires all day long. We can be praying to Jesus all day long. We can do all of that stuff. But then if when we're done praying, then we go back to worrying, judging, doing all that stuff. So if we're flip-flopping back and forth, like I'm praying, I'm so grateful. And then right after that, we're like, oh my God, it's never going to happen. I'm so worried, freaking out, angry, frustrated. The vortex can't download. There's no space. So meditation doesn't require you to be perfect. It doesn't always require you to be in that joyful state of attraction. It just asks you to be neutral. So some of this stuff can start trickling in. And that's why people see their lives change when they start meditating, because finally they're creating space in their being for all of their desires to come to them. The idea is that we do have the potential to create a heaven on earth, and everything we want is just outside our field, just outside our comfort zone, as we heard, and meditation, when you first start doing it, is uncomfortable because it's taking up time in your schedule that you're not used to. You're doubting, am I doing this right? When there's, Jay said so beautifully, there's a million different ways to meditate. If something in your mind says, do this, then do that. Just do it. Like, don't do nothing. And then eventually you might want to have more formal training from, I do think there's a lot of benefit to a still silent meditation, and just like having a little training on that, just go to your local meditation center. I don't identify as a Buddhist. But when I very first started, I lived in Seattle, and there was a Buddhist, I think they called it a Buddhist temple. And they did Vipassana, weekly Vipassana meditation. So, you can still go to church on Sunday and then go check out a meditation at the local Buddhist place and just see what it's about, because it's not about becoming anything other than who you are always destined to be, which is a person that shines divine light.
I spent several years of my life stressed, anxious, and depressed. I needed to find something that would make my life work. For me, that was meditation. With meditation, I found the peace of mind that I was looking for. I found the happiness. And I found a way to improve every area of my life, my emotional life, my spiritual life, my relationships. I was able to discover things about myself. I can give you the tools to meditate. I will walk you through the process and hold your hand. Whether you're a beginner to meditation who's never meditated, or whether you're someone who's tried meditation and it just never seemed to work, we can make it work. Meditation is something that everyone can do, and I can show you how. Check out my course on meditation. Well, the thing with meditation is that virtually every religion has some form of meditation that's in it, because you can see it in Christianity, Judaism, and of course Buddhism and Hinduism. But like Islam, I found out has meditative practices that they can do and things like that. And it can be helpful to your religious and spiritual practice. But then there's also people that are atheists that like to do meditation simply for mental health. So meditation has something to offer everyone.
It does. That's why it's so wonderful, because true meditation is non-secular or secular, non-denominational. It is about coming into alignment with your inner being. And your inner being is love, and your inner being doesn't care what religion you are, or even if you're an atheist. I mean, that's the most beautiful thing about people that really truly know God. God doesn't care if you believe. It's God. Why would God care if you believe? You know what I mean? Of course, you're going to get more benefit if you do, but you can have a perfectly happy life basking in the glow of other believers. Like, you don't, a healthy amount of skepticism is fine. You know what I mean? Like, I would say an atheist probably isn't going to experience some of these transcendent feelings of joy and euphoria and other things that can come in a spiritual practice, but I don't know that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I love the feeling of connecting to something holy, like something that brings me this kind of joy, but then also can bring me to my knees. You know, there's something I like about that. Faith is what it is, right? Because um,
Mm-hmm.
an atheist just had no proof, and maybe they're not looking for it. You know what I mean? And a lot of people who are religious have also had no proof. And then me, I've had plenty of proof. Like, I've had many experiences in my life that have felt divine. My whole life feels divinely guided. And whether that's true or false, it's like everything is subjective. You know what I mean? But I'm a believer because
Mm-hmm.
it shows up in my life. Like, I've gotten my proof. I've gotten plenty of proof. You know, and enough proof that I'm making my way as a spiritual teacher. Um, but I'm not here to like convince anyone of what to believe. That's the wonderful thing about meditation, is it's experiential. And that's the best thing about divinity too. At the end of the day, divinity is experienced. And there's a lot of people that talk about religion and talk about God's will who have never actually experienced divinity. They just don't know it. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So,
because it's kind of like, when you look at the Bible, because a lot of people are like, they look at the Bible, they read it, and they're like, that's all I need. But, and they don't want to have any experiences because they're kind of afraid of experiences. But so much of the Bible was people having spiritual experiences. It's a record of people having a bunch of spiritual experiences, and you kind of miss that,
yeah.
you know.
Yeah, I'm by no means a biblical scholar at all. I'll be honest. I pick it up here and there, but I have not read it on any real significant level. But what I do know of it, I've read books that go through the chronological history. I'm historically and educated, just not on the actual book itself. But my favorite part is like the crazy prophets, because they're like me, right? They're the ones that like had to, I mean, I'm kind of making my way back in the mainstream again, but like the gifted ones, the ones that were bringing the word and bringing the truth, were always ostracized. I mean, in that day, it sounds like maybe they're a little bit more respected. But here we kind of take the people that feel tapped into that spirit and we like call them crazy, call them weird, call them woo woo, do all of that stuff. And so there's so much in the Bible that's very validating to my life in terms of the struggles that a seeker goes through on their quest to embody their divinity and
Mm-hmm.
experience Christ in
Well,
their life.
so what was your spiritual awakening? Because you said at the beginning you had a spiritual awakening. What was
Yeah.
your spiritual awakening?
Well, it started, a spiritual awakening tends to creep up on people. So I was already in it before I was aware I was in it. And it was because I was realizing I wasn't fulfilled as an engineer. You know, I really had a dream job. I got to be in a lab doing really interesting things, cutting edge, and it wasn't fulfilling to me. So I had set in motion through my thoughts of wanting something more to come to me. And it really started with the book Eckhart Tolle, Awakening to Your Life Purpose. Are you familiar with Eckhart Tolle? I bet you are.
Yeah, I've heard of him. Yeah.
Yeah. So he's all about the present moment, mindfulness. He doesn't use Vipassana. He's even more like, he had an awakening. He was on the verge of committing suicide. That's how depressed he was. And he had this thought like, I want to kill myself. And at that time, his consciousness was like, who is I and who is myself? And he had this realizing of the dualism of being, is the best way I can describe it. And he woke up the next day like enlightened, basically, and wrote these books. And so one of them was very transformative to me. And it's called A New Earth, Awakening to Your Life's Purpose. And that had started my journey into little things like what you're probably experiencing. I would drive home from work and I'd be frustrated in traffic. And I was finally able to realize that it wasn't the person in front of me that I was frustrated with. It was like me. I was creating the frustration. Like the traffic was not responsible for how I felt. I was. Those were the first kind of like that what I would call the first like taste of like self-awareness. Now, this is where it's going to get a little bit more next level, but hopefully, your audience will appreciate this. I also started experimenting with psilocybin, which is magic mushrooms, a plant medicine. And I was not doing them recreationally. The first time I did them, I was reading Awakening to Your Life Purpose. So I was intending to get the spiritual benefit. Now, why? Because I had seen Eckhart Tolle on a TV show, Oprah actually, talking about how he had done LSD one time, and it did remind him of being of his enlightened state. I mean, he's not a person that walks around and says like, I'm enlightened, but we accept, you know what I mean? And so he's like, he calls it awakened, that LSD was very similar to being like that experience in a much more grounded way. So it made me want to explore. And so I explored with psilocybin because that's much more natural. And so the full on day of my awakening, I was on psilocybin mushrooms. And the only way that I can describe it is the way that the plant medicines work is they suppress your ego for a little bit. And it allows you to see the nature of reality from a more expanded viewpoint, from a more connected viewpoint, and from a more godly and divine viewpoint. And of course, this depends on one's vibration and what situation they're taking it in. But in my case, I've always created sacred space for deeper understanding of myself in these situations. And so this one night, I had some friends over and we had done some mushrooms, and I can't even explain it. I had an experience of love, like, they were kicking in, and I had this profound experience of love for my dog. And then I started dancing around the room, and this energy like entered my body is the best way I can describe it. And I looked down and I saw this book, and it was said Awakening to Your Life's Purpose. It was the Eckhart Tolle book. And these two words came to me, dance and spirituality. And okay, I'll tell this next part. So this will make sense because I know there's a lot of Bible. I know that your audience seems to be very Christian. So after I had done that, I was like, oh my gosh, what does this mean? And the greatest amount of fear you could ever imagine came over me. And I had this image of Christ on the cross. And the fear that I was experiencing, I would call it an ego death. From an educated point of view now, I would call it an ego death. At that time, it was just profound fear. It was like I was on mushrooms. I was like, oh my God, I'm the one. I have to go tell Eckhart. Well, they're going to want to kill me. The whole thing. Yeah. The reason I'm telling this story is because as we start to awaken, we experience often a situation of fear or little fears that keep us from moving forward in the path. Not everybody had the will of Christ, right? To first spend those 40 days battling, and then to come out on top, and then to march into his persecution, fearless. Is like, that is what every human needs to go through, their own archetypal story, in order to reach their highest potential in terms of their Christ consciousness. So in that case, that evening, I experienced what would we call, I literally did think that my future, that I was going to be murdered for what I had just been given, whatever that was. But I turned to mindfulness and I took a deep breath, and I was like, well, if this is going to happen, if I'm going to be sacrificed or whatever, the image wasn't clear, I'll be ready. And I just sat down and I started meditating, because that's the whole point of meditation, is to bring you back from the chaos. And so I was able to just take myself out of this situation where I was feeling like tremendous fear. And I could just say, well, it's not happening now. And
Mm-hmm.
hey, if my purpose is to be a grand spiritual leader and disseminate wisdom onto the world, then I'll happily die for it. Like if that's the purpose, and if I'm going to be well known like Jesus, like, you know what I mean? Like if that's what you have to do, that's what you do. Like just, confronting fear is a part of awakening. And so in my case, it happened on the same night of my awakening. I experienced all this fear, but the next day that was still there. I knew my purpose. I can't describe it. And I didn't know how it would look. So I went to Meetup and I joined this women's spiritual pursuit meetup and I started learning about chakra. So at this time, my only framework was that I was a Catholic. I had grown up Catholic. I didn't know what a chakra was. I had just maybe started meditating, somewhat regularly, and then playing with the mushrooms, maybe like 3-4 times. It wasn't like I was like doing them every weekend and going out. It was always like very intentional. And then I started learning all this other stuff. Before I knew it, I quit my job. I went to live at a retreat center. Then I lived at a Buddhist retreat center. And I just kind of dove into my spiritual path. So that was a long answer to your question. But yeah, my awakening started with realizing I wanted more from my life and knowing that I was not going to accept my life as it was, that it had to change. And then things started coming to me, one of them being meditation, the other one being psilocybin. And using those two conjunctly, I had an awakening of my purpose. And I quit my job and have completely changed my life in the past decade into something I never in a million years would have thought I could be. And it's a gift.
Well, it sounds kind of similar to like people that have taken DMT sometimes have experiences that are similar to near-death experiences. I don't know if you've ever heard the drug DMT.
Yeah, I did that one time. I did not like it. So my purpose here, despite the fact that I have used psilocybin in the past, and I will again in my life, I'm sure. But my purpose is to be an embodied leader, like movement and like how to bring spirit into the body. And so when I did DMT, my body did not like it, and it was like, oh my God. And like I was like, it only lasts a couple. DMT for some people, it lasts like a span of a minute. But a person, you experience timelessness and you can go off, have near death experiences, talk to God. I mean, any number of things. People talk to, we can go way into, but yes, people can go in DMT and have amazing life-changing experiences in what might seem like hours in a span of a couple minutes. So I only did it one time. And basically my consciousness was like, the drug told me, or something told me, this medicine isn't for you. Like, you don't have anything. This isn't for you. You don't, not now. And so I just kind of got down on my hands and knees and I was like, well, it's only gonna be a couple minutes. And the visions were amazing. Like, it was like I was in a video game, very vivid, very whatever. But in terms of the blast off, for whatever reason, I didn't want to, and I got the message that I don't need to, because that's not the purpose. The purpose is to be here, which is not to say anything bad about people that use DMT responsibly. It can heal a lot of things, I've heard. But yeah, psilocybin is a similar. I think psilocybin is probably a little bit intense, and it lasts more like hours. So it's like a different experience because I think they ignite different things in the brain.
Mm-hmm. So what is Joe Dispenza? What does he teach? Because you said you were into Dispenza as well.
Yeah, so Joe Dispenza is he teaches kind of a mix of things. So he's got some books, Becoming Supernatural, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. And the idea is very much the same of all the meditations, that basically we just have programs that tell us who we are and how to act. And we have to undo these programs through meditation, through affirmations, through breathing, through anything you do in order to experience miracles, right? So he calls God the universal field within and all around. And in a meditation, like one of his meditations is an hour. His one that really gives the most transformation for people is an hour and 15 minutes. And you sit, you spend about 15 minutes doing what would be Vipassana, kind of scanning your body and just feeling the sensations. And this kind of opens you in a more receptive place. Then you decide the focus of your meditation, and you are going to give this negative emotion you're going to release it. You're going to give it to the creator of all that is. So it might be frustration, it might be worry, it might be lack. So whatever thing about you, this is from his book, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. Whatever it is about you, you have to admit it. You have to admit, very much repenting, you have to admit to God that you're an angry person, that you're a frustrated person, that you worry, that you experience lack. So you admit it and you give it to God, or in their words, the infinite source within and all around, I think is what he uses. And then the next part of the meditation is the act of changing. So if you imagine you've given it, you still have these programs that run. You still have to make the change. The conscious mind still has to be involved. Like, yes, God can do miracles, but we have to prove we're worthy, right? We got to show up. So then there's a exercise of changing where you imagine yourself waking up in the morning and imagining that emotion coming. Something, let's just use frustration. Or anxiety. I know that's one a lot of people were stressed. So you wake up and you feel that anxiety coming. And what do? You change. You imagine yourself changing, just stopping it. Nope, I'm not going to go here. Nope, not going to go here. And so you do this exercise of commanding change. Then this is all in an hour, 15-minute meditation. This book, Breaking the Habit of You Bring Yourself, teaches this in a full book, if anyone's interested. After you have learned to change, then it gets fun. Here comes the visualization. Now you visualize the life that you want. You're imagining how it feels. This is all the things teach the same thing. And it's about feeling good in your body, feeling the excitement, feeling yourself as the type of person you want to be, imagining what it feels like to be without anxiety, which can be hard to do sometimes. I do theta healing, which is a type of healing where we can download feelings in. The idea is if one has never experienced abundance, then it's hard to feel abundant because your body has no framework. But in that case, you do what you can to imagine feeling good. Then you ask the infinite source to give you an experience in your day that will let you know that he, she has heard you. So you're and it's happened for me. I'll do the meditation on abundant, for example. And then later that day, just out of nowhere, I'll get a new private client or something, So you ask the universe for a sign that they heard you, that they heard your prayer, that they heard your meditation. And then you thank them and you go about your day. But Joe Dispenza has facilitated through his work multiple miracles. Many people have had miraculous, because the idea is when you change the mind in the right way, miracles can happen. There's no such thing as reality. Everything's matter and thoughts, right? Everything is 99.999% empty space. So there's literally no solid matter. So when you get your mind aligned right, you can have miraculous healings. And so he's got many, many books. His week-long retreats are $1,500 starting price. And people get profound shifts. Not everyone. I mean, everyone's got their blocks, right? I mean, it would be so nice if everyone could do his meditation and be instantly healed of their chronic illness. But it's definitely worth a try for everyone, because there certainly are people. And this goes up again, kind of about these past lives. Like, somebody could have lived many, many past lives and gotten many, many virtues and many, many things, and done all the meditations and have this really deep spiritual foundation. And then in this lifetime, they have a chronic illness and they find Joe Dispenza. They find me. I have people that are experiencing what they might call miracles in their life after working with me. They do the work and then they have these profound shifts. That's because they had done a lot of work and this was just the last key they're needing. Whereas some people maybe just haven't done as much. They're more in the trenches this time of life. You know what I mean? This time around. So they are experiencing the same chronic illness, but the meditation might not lead to an instant healing. Like, they might have a little bit of more work to put in, like everything is just about effort. Like, spiritual evolution, spiritual growth, healing requires effort, because the effort is in the receiving. Because we've been so conditioned to do. And even when it comes to God, we're not taught to receive from God. We're taught to do God's will. And so the work is in retraining ourselves to receive and get in a totally different framework of what it means to be aligned with Christ consciousness. That it's not our job to go convince everyone. It's our job to live the truth, live the abundance. And if people want to ask us, people want in on this, yes, like, it's free ticket to the show. But God never wanted us to all be crusaders. You know what I mean? Like, gotta receive.
I had one guest that was talking about how illness in many cases may be as a result of trauma in our life, or it could even be trauma in past lives. Do you believe that as well, that it could be
Yeah,
trauma from a past life or a current life that's causing an
100%.
illness?
100%. I do generational healing. That's kind of the realm. My workshop I have coming up in 2 weeks, 10 days actually, is Ignite Your Sacred Flame, 3 steps to generational healing. Because so much of this, we keep hearing this word epigenetics is coming back. It's about the fact that it's nature and nurture. And so, yes, when someone's been abused, when someone's never shown love, okay, I'm going to make this really simple. We'll call it positive energy and negative energy, right? So a body, a healthy body is full of, and this is physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. Now, when people are having physical illness, that's the most materialized. And so that sometimes is the most difficult to unwind spiritually, because it's taken more to get ingrained into the body. I kind of lost my train of thought. What was your question again? Oh, generational healing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, positive and negative energy. So a healthy body is light. A baby is born into this world and they have trauma. Let's just say, I'm going to use myself an example, because we don't even need to talk about trauma. We can just talk about real life. So I grew up in a family that loved me, but my dad spanked me and said things like, "Don't cry, I'll give you something to cry about." So when that's happened, and then of course there are many people who are abused even more, even in the name of God, right? Even in the name of what I call unconscious parenting, like really aggressive parenting, in my opinion, is creating cultural trauma. So we'll call this negative energy, right? Doesn't mean it's bad people, just means we don't always know, right? So this negative dark is putting on to this light being. And before you know it, all of that negative energy from being abused, bullied, any sort of abuse, however you want to look at it, even chronic, you're like generations of alcoholics. There could be someone who is born and
Mm-hmm.
they manage to skirt that issue. They're not an alcoholic, but they might have some other issue that's begging attention. So that can happen generationally. And then it can also happen. So when all of this negative energy comes on, yeah, it shows up in the body as illness. Any, fibromyalgia, especially these invisible diseases. I definitely think so much arthritis, I think, is energetic trauma. And then in terms of past life, yes, especially for women, a lot of our fear of shining bright, of being in the world is this fear of like persecution. And yes, we're all going to deal with that stuff. But honestly, at what I'm here to just say, what Spirit wants to say is we will get to the past life stuff. Don't worry. But all we have to do right now is look at this life. Like, because even the people that think they had great lives, if you get really real, the way culture has been designed, like, is it ideal? Is our life one that created us to
Mm-hmm.
be the best we can be? And I'm just pointing at parenting in general. Like, we have all of us, my parents were parented even rougher than I was, you know what I mean? And like, it's changing now, but we still deserve to heal. And our parents do too, right? To like really like forgive and like get a new cultural thing. So yes, illness. And I guess my point about this is look at all the mental illness on the planet, because stress and anxiety is illness. That is dis-ease. And the percentage of people that are on antidepressants and anti-anxiety medication, I mean, I could just start crying right now, or I'm a little bit too like feeling a little bit too fiery to like go into the tears, but it's like, it's insane what's happening in our culture. Like, we are an ill culture and we need to admit that, give that to Spirit. And what Spirit might say the answer
Mm-hmm.
is if we all start meditating, right? And start unwinding and the thing is, if someone's going to dive deep into a meditation practice, it can bring up stuff, which is why it is good to have the affirmation practices, the loving kindness practices, or to have some sort of healer or spiritual guide supporting you, which that might be a group that you meditate with. Like, a spiritual path is hard to do alone. Like these apps, everybody's getting these
Mm-hmm.
meditation apps and they're great, but nothing takes the place of community when it comes to spiritual awakening and mindfulness. Like, I love that the apps are an option, but it's not the same as finding a spiritual community.
Mm-hmm. Were you talking about like with generational trauma? Is it possible that you could have been raised in a very loving, wonderful environment, but maybe one of your parents or grandparents brought trauma and passed it down to you, just without even intending, or like, and like sometimes you wonder about kids that are adopted, that okay, they've got this ideal adoptive family, but could some of the trauma from the bio parents have been passed to them?
Yeah, definitely. And it comes in different ways. Like, for example, this is an anonymous, so I feel like I can share just like an anonymous client story about um her mom was sexually abused when she was a child. Now, that person, my client, was an egg inside her mother's body. The eggs are in a baby in utero. So she had already experienced, her egg that she became had experienced the same trauma that her mother had experienced. So that's a really interesting point that people need to consider, that anything that happened to a mom or even a grandmother, like if a grandmother is pregnant, then the eggs of her grandchild are in her, because the eggs form in utero. So definitely, if trauma happened, when you're talking about adoption, and then when we're not talking about adoption, what can happen a lot is, yes, like a parent can have trauma, and then the next generation will be born, and they'll do everything they can to be like the best and not repeat that pattern, but they don't actually heal the riff or whatever it might be. That can skip a generation, and they could have a kid that is just like depressed, is kind of what comes to mind. Like, I feel like it would be kind of like an invisible something that nobody really knows why. And yeah, I do believe it could be, because I believe it all wants to be healed and it wants to be acknowledged. And that's why I'm kind of talking about this and like mentioning the aggressive parenting, because I think it is something that we're changing in our culture. But it's a huge trauma, and then that doesn't even talk about the trauma of African Americans and like slavery in America. That we're only talking 2 generations in some cases, 3 generations. And then even, Europeans traveling, I'm not the type of person that looks at like all Europeans as colonizers, like we're all just living where we're living. But I do think of the treacherous life that pioneers of any race had to live, or anyone that came over to this new world. And in that case, we're only talking 3 or 4 generations in some cases. So yeah, there's a lot of generational trauma. And I think it shows up in our life culturally around money. Like we've had so much all of us are immigrants, right? Like, well, most of us, most people in America, like 98% of people in America do not have a shit ton of money, like, so the idea is like, we have to kind of address all of the underlying generational issues of lack and scarcity. And honestly, since we're talking about it, it goes all the way back to cavemen. Do you know what I mean? The idea is like being a hunter and being a gatherer, and like your life was 100% survival. And that's still how many of us are living. And so the awakening is to kind of move out of that fight or flight mode. Meditation can be a pathway to move out of that fight or flight mode. And then, yes, definitely generational healing and healing like real illness too. I mean, just 2 of my clients recently, by the end of my 4-month program, now it's a 6-month program, had gotten off antidepressants. I mean, they were on relatively low doses. I'm not a person that's like, if, get off those drugs, but meditation is a pathway to mental health. And good mental health is a pathway to good physical health, 100%. And so the more people that we can get, even if meditation can be dancing, put on a song you like and dance for 5 minutes, right? I think anything that interrupts your pattern and brings you into your body and brings some level of awareness is beneficial. And then, of course, when you can meditate and allow those negative emotions to rise and witness them, or if you have if you get angry or something, and you can take that time to meditate and reflect and like forgive yourself, but also be real with yourself, you will definitely transform your life. So anyone that is thinking about, should I have a meditation practice? The answer is definitely, yeah, find a way to take 5 minutes 3 times a week, and just, even if it's just listening to a meditation song, like one of the spa songs, or even a chakra tone, or you can listen to music that's like 425 hertz, which is a specific resonance that brings abundance. Like, there's so much juiciness out there because the world is divine and it's about space and sound. None of the things that we think are important on a spiritual sense. It's our minds, our thoughts, and how we feel in our body. That's what's important. And so we need to start putting more energy there.
So what is all the spiritual work and meditative work that you do for other people? Because it sounds like you do quite a bit.
Yeah, so I fall under the category of what I would say done for you work. So I do shamanic healing and also theta healing, which is a faith-based, asking the creator of all that is for certain healings and such. And I work with people for 6 months at a time, because that's kind of how long takes to like create a new pattern. And so I don't necessarily teach meditation. I do energy work. And the energy work that I do is very much kind of it's generational. Like the first week, we always work with the father energy. Then we work with the mother energy. And then just anyone in our life who has cast a shadow on us, a bully, ex-partners, toxic coworkers, just all the people throughout our lives that have hurt us or in some way shunned us, turned us away from the light. We do this. I have a technique, which I'm not going to go into now, but it's a shamanic healing technique using Reiki. Reiki is universal energy. And it's a type of energy that can be picked up on EKGs. So it's definitely real. It's not necessarily faith-based, like there's scientific evidence for it. And then, of course, faith helps it. And so I take people through this program where we go through their energy system, their chakra system over the course of 6 months to get a transformation. I've worked with people, recovering addicts, or people who have been in recovery who are trying to get to the next level and to stay in recovery. I've worked with other healers who wanted to get to the deepest roots of their generational trauma. Because yes, once you get to the higher levels, that's when the past life starts coming in. And a lot of healers and even spiritual guides like yourself start experiencing the past life because the past life has wanted us to stay quiet. You know, we have so many examples of witches being burnt at the stake. Jesus is a perfect example of being crucified, all of the, the conquests and all of that stuff. So there's many, many examples of when spiritual people were murdered. And so I work with a lot of women who are wanting to come out, women and men, but a lot more women right now, who are ready to come out of the shadows, who are aware that something is holding them back and they don't know what it is. It's something like fear, but it might just be like distraction. Like we have all these excuses for not taking forward steps. And a lot of times this is that past life stuff that we're not even aware of. And so we kind of dive into that stuff too, and just really help people remove blocks. So like I said, I work with people who are not spiritual in the way I am yet. Like they're just learning what a chakra is, but they're interested in it. And then I work with really, really experienced healers who are wanting to go to the next level. Because the work that I do, I definitely call myself a spiritual guide in that it's spirit driven. It's me, spirit, and you. And so each session is individualized. Everything that you get energetically is direct from spirit. I work in the Ascended Master.
Well, is that really what is needed?
Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. I was just going to say, so is that really what's going to transform the world, is when people start to apply energy healing and meditation on a larger scale? Is that where the transformation of the world is going to take place?
I 100% think so. Because that's why I also do. That's how it started for me. Like I said, I used to be an engineer and I found out about healing, and I used to go out on my breaks and just imagine healing my chakras, even before I did Reiki. And then I got my level 1 Reiki when I was still an engineer with Boeing. So yes, I have these programs where I do healing on other people, but I also have programs where I just initiate people to Reiki so that they can do energy healing on themselves. Because meditation is powerful. And then I kind of say like energy healing is like meditation on steroids. Like it just kind of like gives a little more packs a little bit more punch. But I do think that's and because what's going to transform the world is people coming into alignment with their higher selves. And there's breath work. I, of course, advocate for the type of energy. I wouldn't be doing what I do if I didn't think it was the best out there, right? But everybody thinks that. There's so many good things out there. So even just going to a yoga class might be a first step for some people. Sure, consider a yoga class meditation if you want. You know what I mean? But there's breath work, there's it's everybody finding what works for them. And I would love, my dream is that the whole world is initiated to Reiki 1. Because my belief is that Christ, Yeshua, Master Yeshua, when he was traveling in
Mm-hmm.
his 20s and early 30s, kind of before he emerged, he was getting these initiations in sacred temples and learning these things. So the hands-on healing that he was doing is very much Reiki. It's just universal energy. And so I would love the whole world to have a level 1 Reiki initiation so that it can do Reiki on themselves and do it. And so it's just like a really normal thing, for people of all faiths, because yes, I 100% believe that this type of stuff, and even without the energy work, just meditation, like if all the religions were like, okay, we're going to also start doing mindfulness, you know what I mean? The Buddha said, the Dalai Lama said that when we start introducing mindfulness into the elementary schools, we'll have peace on earth within 2 generations. And I believe that too. I just think it's kind of a slow pace. I think
Mm-hmm.
we have at least another generation till we're going to see it in like all the schools. Like meditation needs to be taught like math is taught, like not just optional.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, and I've seen like a few stories that have floated on social media, and I'll share them about how school districts in some places were replacing out things like detention for meditation, and they're finding that it actually helps with disciplinary problems and things like that better than the more conventional disciplines that they'd used in the past. So yeah, I mean that
Yeah.
would go along with it.
Yeah. Well, it looks like we're at an hour. I think that's a good place to wrap it up, that it is happening. That's the exciting thing, Jay. I know that you're on a mission here to spread the love of meditation, and it's important what you're doing, because it's like one person watching this that had never considered meditation might not meditate today. They might not even meditate this year. But just like the Buddha, just like every step, it's like every seed, you know, I'll liken it to the fact, like, I'm a vegan now. I never in a million years thought that I
Mm-hmm.
would not eat meat. And then I remember when I first had this like awakened idea, like, I I don't want to hurt the animals. Like, I don't want to eat meat. And then it was like still 4 years for me to give up meat. And I didn't judge myself. And so the same thing is true for meditation. Like, you might not be ready to actually dive in yet. There are any number of psychological blocks that might keep a person from that 5 minutes. And it might be a past life. It could be a self-worth. Like, people don't feel worthy of wellness. They don't feel worthy of mental health. They would rather just take a pill, whatever. Um, but just allowing that to know that it's happening, and that what you're doing is planting seeds, and that, yes, it is happening in schools. It's, and it will continue to happen in more schools, and it will become normal because we're doing this together. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
Sunday schools
So
will
where
be
can
even more like
people reach?
Hogwarts.
Mm-hmm. Where can
Yes.
people reach out to you if they want to get a hold of you?
Yes. So my name right there, Shamama Lynn, is kind of everything without the space. So at Shamama Lynn on Instagram will take you to my Instagram page. Um, www.shamamalynn.com is not a very done page, but if you do shamamalynn.com/links, it'll take you to a link tree that has
Mm-hmm.
all of my active landing pages. Because I do have a couple workshops coming up. And then same with Facebook at Shamama Lynn, Facebook/Shamama Lynn. And then that's my Facebook page. And
Mm-hmm.
from there, you can find Lynn Gravatt and track me down personally. But yeah, all of the socials under Shamama Lynn.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, thanks for being on the show today. It was a pleasure to have you.
It was nice talking, Jay. Thanks for having me. And thank you for the mission that you're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. And if anybody is looking for some healing, I'd love to talk. I do breakthrough. Everyone gets a free breakthrough session. So, on my page, on that links page, there's a link, to book a breakthrough session. It's just a 30-minute to find out what's going on in your life and what kind of guidance. Because like I said, I have packages, we can get someone initiated to Reiki for as low as $150. That's like how important it is that everybody has this work. And then of course I have one-on-one weekly coaching, which is higher priced. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, Jay.